I want you to imagine something for a moment. You walk into a government office building in Abuja. You find an agency operating there with staff, vehicles, police escorts, and a full website. You attend their events, you sign their letters, you open accounts for them at the Central Bank of Nigeria. And then one day, the government looks up and says, "That agency does not exist. We have never heard of it." That is not something I made up. That is what is happening right now inside the Nigerian federal government. And it involves one of the most powerful men in Asorok. A man named Prince Adeniyi says he paid 600 million naira to become the Director General of a presidential agency. He says 400 million of that money went directly to Femi Gbajabiamila, the Chief of Staff to President Tinubu. He says the agency operated for over a year inside the Federal Secretariat. He says it appeared in Nigeria's 2026 national budget with a salary line of 573 million naira. The presidency says none of it is true. They say the agency is fake. They say Adeniyi is a fraudster. They say Gbajabiamila had nothing to do with it. But here's the question that nobody in the presidency's 1,279-word statement answered. If the agency does not exist, how did it get an office inside the Federal Secretariat? How did it get police escorts and official vehicles? How did it open accounts at the Central Bank of Nigeria? How did it appear in the 2026 Appropriation Act? And how did the Office of the Head of the Civil Service approve 314 staff positions for an agency that the government says does not exist? And there is one more question. The one man who could answer all of those questions is named Babatunde Tanimola. He was the intermediary between Adeniyi and Gbajabiamila. He died in a hotel fire in Atiku, Abuja, on October 22, 2025, one day after the Chief of Staff's petition was received by the police. Stay with me, because this story goes all the way to the top. If you are new to Pulse Nigeria HQ, this channel exists to give Nigerians the political analysis that mainstream media will not touch. Subscribe now and stay with me, because this is the biggest corruption story inside Tinubu's government in 2026, and it is moving fast. Who these people are and how this scandal started. Let us go through this carefully from the beginning, because there are several moving parts and I want you to understand every one of them before we get to the most important questions. Femi Gbajabiamila is the Chief of Staff to President Bola Tinubu. Before that, he was Speaker of the House of Representatives. He is one of the 2 or 3 most powerful people in the Nigerian federal government right now. Whatever happens in Asorok, Gbajabiamila is at the center of it. He is the gatekeeper. Prince Adeniyi is a businessman and political figure who says he was appointed Director General of the Presidential Foreign Intervention Promotion Council by President Tinubu, with the appointment arranged through Gbajabiamila's office. He says he paid for this appointment. He says he has documents to prove it. According to Adeniyi's account, which has been reported by Punch, Vanguard, Daily Post, and PM News, here is what happened. Adeniyi approached Gbajabiamila's office seeking a government appointment. Through an intermediary named Babatunde Tanimola, he allegedly paid 600 million naira. 400 million was paid upfront through proxies to Gbajabiamila. 200 million naira remained outstanding. He was then given a presidential appointment letter, an office inside the Federal Secretariat, police escorts, and official government vehicles. His agency, the Presidential Foreign Intervention Promotion Council, began operating. It attended government functions. It hosted foreign ambassadors at the Wells-Carlton Hotel in Asokoro. It applied for a note verbale from the United States Embassy to facilitate visa processing for its staff. It opened multiple accounts at the Central Bank of Nigeria. And then, in August 2025, the Office of the Head of the Civil Service of the Federation sent Adeniyi a letter approving 314 staff positions for his agency. That letter was signed by Mimi Abu, Director of Organization Design and Development in the Head of Service Office, a real government official signing a real government letter for an agency the Presidency now says does not exist. The situation started unraveling in October 2025. Officials at the Nigerian Investment Promotion Commission noticed that another agency appeared to be functioning at cross purposes with them. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs raised alarm after Adeniyi hosted ambassadors without notifying or engaging the ministry. On October 15, 2025, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs wrote to the Office of the National Security Advisor and the Office of the Chief of Staff seeking clarification. On October 17, 2025, Gbajabiamila petitioned the Department of State Services and the Nigeria Police Force, describing Adeniyi as a fraudster who had forged presidential appointment letters purportedly from his office. 5 days later, on October 22, 2025, Babatunde Tanimola, the man who served as the go-between for Adeniyi and Gbajabiamila, died in a fire at a hotel in Utako, Abuja. On October 27, 2025, Adeniyi was arrested by police operatives at his Federal Secretariat office. He was charged on November 27, 2025, with 8 counts including conspiracy to commit forgery, forgery of presidential appointment documents, and impersonation as a Director General of a fictitious organization. That appeared to be the end of the story. A fraudster arrested, a fake agency shut down. Case closed. But Adeniyi did not stay quiet. He went on bail, and in June 2026, he resurfaced publicly with fresh claims. He said he had genuinely been appointed by Gbajabiamila. He said the 400 million naira bribery payment was real. He rejected Gbajabiamila's demand for 48% of the agency's 27.3 billion naira takeoff grant, and he said that rejection was the reason the Presidency suddenly decided his agency was fake and his appointment was forged. On June 8, 2026, Gbajabiamila issued a public disclaimer disowning Adeniyi. On June 11th, former Ekiti State Governor Ayo Fayoso called for Gbajabiamila to be investigated. Atiku Abubakar has now given Tinubu 7 days to prove his innocence or risk being charged with complicity. The NNDPC, the ADC, and former ACP officials are all demanding a judicial commission of inquiry. And as of today, July 3, 2026, this story is on the front page of every major Nigerian newspaper. The 5 questions the Presidency has not answered. The Presidency issued a 1,279-word statement. I read every word of it, and I want to tell you what it answered and what it did not answer, because the gap between those two things is where the real story lives. The statement said Adeniyi forged documents. It said Gbajabiamila petitioned the police. It said Adeniyi operated 34 bank accounts. It said the agency is not recognized by the government. All of that may be true. But here are the 5 questions the statement did not answer. Question 1. How did an agency that does not exist get an office inside the Federal Secretariat and operate there for over a year? The Federal Secretariat is not a public market where anyone can set up a stall. Office space there requires government authorization. Who authorized it? The Presidency statement did not say. Question 2. How did a fake agency open a domiciliary account, a pound sterling account, and a treasury single account at the Central Bank of Nigeria? The NWC asked this question directly, and the answer matters enormously. To open a TSA account at the CBN, you need documentation from the Office of the Accountant General of the Federation. You need letters from government ministries. You need official approval. Real civil servants in real government offices processed those documents. Who are they, and what did they sign? Question 3. How did the agency appear on pages 50 and 51 of Nigeria's 2026 Appropriation Act with a salary allocation of 573 million naira? The national budget does not write itself. Budget line items go through the Ministry of Finance, the Budget Office of the Federation, and ultimately the National Assembly. Multiple government officials at multiple levels would have seen and approved this line item. The presidency has been completely silent on how a non-existent agency got into the national budget. Question 4. How did the Office of the Head of the Civil Service sign a letter dated August 7, 2025, approving 314 staff positions for this agency? That letter was signed by a named civil servant, Mimi Abu. It is a real document. It came from a real government office. The presidency has not addressed this letter at all in any of its public statements. Question 5. And this is the most important question of all. Gbajabiamila's petition to the DSS and the police was dated October 17, 2025. Babatunde Tanimola, the key intermediary, died in a hotel fire in Atiku, Abuja on October 22, 2025. 5 days after the petition was filed, 1 day after the police reportedly received it. Tanimola was the man whose testimony could have confirmed or denied whether Gbajabiamila knew about or benefited from the payment. He is now dead. What were the exact circumstances of that fire? The presidency statement says the police confirmed he died in a hotel. It does not say what caused the fire. It does not say whether there was an investigation. It does not say whether the fire was ruled accidental. Former APC Deputy National Publicity Secretary Timi Frank has demanded a forensic investigation into Tanimola's death. He said publicly that Nigeria and Tanimola's family deserve to know the truth about what happened to a man whose testimony was critical to this case and who died at the most convenient possible moment for those with the most to hide. Pattern interrupt 1. The detail that changes everything. Here is the institutional fact that the entire media coverage of this story has underweighted. Gbajabiamila was Speaker of the House of Representatives before becoming Chief of Staff. He knows better than almost anyone in Nigeria how government paperwork works. He knows what is required to open a CBN account. He knows what is required to get a budget line item. He knows what is required to get office space in the Federal Secretariat. If he genuinely had no knowledge of this agency's activities for over a year, despite all of those institutional processes requiring official approvals, that itself is a governance failure of extraordinary scale. Either he knew or he did not know things he was required to know as the second most powerful official in the Nigerian executive. Both possibilities demand a serious independent investigation. Why this story is exploding now and who benefits? Now, let us talk about the political chessboard. Because this story did not explode in October 2025 when Adeniyi was arrested. It exploded in July 2026, 13 months later. And the timing of that explosion tells you something very important about what is really happening. Adeniyi went on bail after his November 2025 charges. He stayed quiet through the end of 2025. Then, in June 2026, 7 months before the presidential election, he resurfaced publicly with his most explosive allegation that Gbajabiamila personally received 400 million naira in bribe money. He said this in the context of claiming that the presidency's denial of his agency was a retaliation for his refusal to pay an additional 200 million naira and his rejection of Gbajabiamila's demand for 48% of a 27 billion naira takeoff grant. The opposition's response has been immediate, coordinated, and politically precise. Atiku gave Tinubu 7 days to respond. The NDC demanded Gbajabiamila's sack on the same day. The ADC called for a judicial commission. Former APC officials demanded forensic investigations. This is not spontaneous outrage. This is a coordinated political operation using a genuine corruption allegation as ammunition heading into 2027. But here is where I want to be analytically honest with you. The fact that the opposition is exploiting this story politically does not make the underlying allegations false. Political exploitation and factual truth are not mutually exclusive. The question of whether Gbajabiamila received 400 million naira is separate from the question of whether opposition politicians are using that allegation strategically. Both things can be true simultaneously. The question nobody is asking: Here is the counterintuitive angle that most Nigerian political commentary is completely missing. Adeniyi himself has admitted in his own public statements that he paid 600 million naira for a government appointment. He is not denying that. He is not claiming he was deceived into thinking the payment was legitimate. He is saying he paid to buy a government position and he wants his money's worth. That admission, buried inside his explosive allegations against Gbajabiamila, is itself a serious matter. The sale and purchase of government appointments is a crime under Nigerian law. If Adeniyi paid 600 million naira for a government appointment, the question of who received that money is not the only question. The equally important question is what kind of system allows a man to believe that paying 600 million naira for a government appointment is a viable transaction in the first place. Nigeria's corruption problem is not just about individual bad actors. It is about a system in which the sale of public appointments has become so normalized that a man can make that payment, operate for over a year in a government building with official support, and only become a problem when the payment dispute leads to a public falling out. That is what this story is really about. Now, let us talk about what Tinubu personally gains and loses from this story. The allegation is against his chief of staff, not him directly. The presidency statement was careful to distance Tinubu from the entire matter, but there are two problems with that distance. First, Gbajabiamila is not a peripheral figure. He is the chief of staff. He is the most senior official in the executive after the president and vice president. Any serious allegation of corruption against the chief of staff reflects directly on the governance culture of the administration he runs. Second, the budget line item is the most difficult problem for the presidency to explain away. If a fake agency appeared in Nigeria's 2026 national budget and Tinubu signed that budget into law, the question of whether anyone in his administration reviewed and queried that line item before he signed it is a question about presidential oversight and governance competence that cannot be deflected by attacking Adeniyi's character. Now, drop a comment below right now and tell me honestly, do you believe Gbajabiamila knew about this agency or not? I want your view before we get to the section that most Nigerians have not thought through yet. The bigger picture behind the 900 million naira. Let us step back from the individuals and talk about what this scandal reveals about how Nigeria is being governed right now. Because the PFIPC story is not just about one fake agency and one disputed appointment. It is a window into a system. Nigeria's Federal Secretariat in Abuja houses hundreds of government agencies, departments, and offices. Every one of those agencies requires authorized office space, approved staffing structures, budget allocations, and banking arrangements through the CBN. Every one of those processes has multiple checkpoints, multiple civil servants, multiple approvals. The fact that an allegedly fake agency navigated all of those checkpoints for over a year without being detected or stopped is not a story about one man's cleverness. It is a story about how thoroughly the oversight mechanisms of the Nigerian federal government have broken down. The budget angle is particularly disturbing. Nigeria's annual budget process runs from September, when the medium-term expenditure framework is submitted, through the executive's budget preparation, through National Assembly review, public hearings, committee scrutiny, floor debates, and finally presidential assent. That process involves hundreds of officials, dozens of committees, and months of legislative work. A line item allocating 573 million naira in salaries to an agency that does not exist, going through all of that without being caught or questioned, is a level of systemic failure that should alarm every Nigerian, regardless of their political affiliation. The civil service angle is equally serious. Mimi Abu, the Director of Organization Design and Development, who signed the letter approving 314 staff positions, is a real civil servant in a real government office. Her approval did not happen in a vacuum. It required documentation, verification, and sign-offs from her supervisors. If her approval was fraudulently obtained, that fraud was sophisticated enough to deceive a professional civil service chain of command. If it was not fraudulently obtained, then people in her reporting line knew about this agency and approved its staffing. On the 2027 implications, this story lands at the worst possible moment for Tinubu's re-election campaign. His economic record is already deeply contested, his eligibility is being challenged in court, his chief of staff is now at the center of a 600 million naira bribery allegation involving a dead witness and a fake agency. Atiku has given him 7 days to respond. That 7-day deadline expires before the end of this week. If Tinubu does not respond substantively, the opposition will interpret that silence as confirmation. If he responds by defending Gbajabiamila without addressing the 5 unanswered questions, the story continues to grow. And if he takes the politically difficult step of ordering Gbajabiamila to step aside for an independent investigation, it will be presented as an admission that something went wrong at the highest levels of his administration. There is no clean exit for this story for Tinubu. Every path available to him costs something, and that is exactly why Atiku set a 7-day deadline rather than simply demanding a response. He knows the clock is running.
The strongest case for Gbajabiamila's innocence. Analytical honesty requires me to present the strongest case for the presidency's position, because it is possible that Adeniyi is exactly what the government says he is, a sophisticated fraudster who forged documents, deceived civil servants, penetrated government systems, and is now using explosive corruption allegations as a legal defense strategy to muddy the waters around his own criminal charges. That scenario is not implausible. Nigeria has seen sophisticated fraud operations before. If Adeniyi genuinely forged appointment letters from the Chief of Staff's office, it is possible that those forgeries were convincing enough to deceive officials throughout the system, leading to the unintended approvals of office space, banking arrangements, and budget lines that the government is now scrambling to explain. The presidency points out that Gbajabiamila himself filed the petition against Adeniyi in October 2025. If the Chief of Staff was complicit in the fraud, the argument goes he would not have been the person who blew the whistle. He would have found ways to quietly make the problem disappear, rather than filing a formal petition that created a paper trail pointing back to his own office. That argument has some logical force, but it also assumes that Gbajabiamila's decision to file a petition was a sign of clean hands rather than a preemptive move to get ahead of a situation that was already becoming uncontrollable. Adeniyi had been operating for over a year. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs had already raised concerns. The NIPC had already noticed the overlap. By October 2025, the situation was going to come to light regardless. Filing the petition first allowed the Chief of Staff to be seen as the person who uncovered the problem rather than the person who enabled it. The verdict the evidence cannot yet support. Here is the most important thing I can tell you about this story right now. We do not yet have enough verified independent evidence to conclusively determine whether Gbajabiamila received money from Adeniyi or not. What we have is Adeniyi's allegation on one side and the presidency's denial on the other. The key witness is dead. The documentary evidence that would resolve it, the bank transfer records, the communication logs, the signed correspondence between Adeniyi and Gbajabiamila, has not been independently verified by any court or investigation. This is precisely why an independent judicial commission of inquiry, not a police investigation that reports to the executive, is what this situation actually requires. And it is precisely why Tinubu's response to Atiku's 7-day deadline matters so much. It will tell you whether this government intends to find the truth or manage the narrative.
What to watch in the next 7 days? Let us close with exactly what to watch, because this story is moving fast, and the next 7 days will determine whether it grows into a constitutional crisis or gets managed into silence. The first thing to watch is Tinubu's response to Atiku's deadline. Atiku gave 7 days from his statement, which was issued this week. A response that addresses the 5 unanswered questions directly and calls for an independent investigation signals one thing. A response that simply repeats the presidency's existing position signals something very different. The second thing to watch is whether Gbajabiamila steps aside voluntarily or is asked to step aside. The NDC, the ADC, and multiple opposition voices are calling for his removal from office pending investigation. If Tinubu protects him in place, every week that Gbajabiamila remains Chief of Staff while these allegations are unresolved will be used as campaign material by the opposition heading into 2027. The third thing to watch is the July 27, 2026 court date. Adeniyi's criminal case returns to the Federal High Court on July 27. His legal team will have the opportunity to introduce evidence in his defense. If any of that evidence includes documentation of payments or communications with Gbajabiamila's office, it will enter the public record through the court process, and the story will enter a new phase entirely. The fourth thing to watch is what happens to the two accomplices named in the original charge, identified only as Femi and Ano, who are currently at large. If either of them is found and cooperates with investigators, their testimony could significantly change what is publicly known about this case. And the fifth thing to watch is Parliament. The National Assembly has the power to summon Gbajabiamila for questioning and to order an independent investigation into how the PFIPC budget line appeared in the 2026 Appropriation Act. If the Senate or the House moves to investigate this, the story escapes the executive's control entirely. Watch whether any committee chairman moves to call hearings on this matter in the coming days. Here's where we are. A man says he paid 600 million naira to Tinubu's chief of staff for a government appointment. The chief of staff says the man is a fraudster and the agency was fake. The key witness who could resolve that dispute died in a hotel fire the day after the police received the chief of staff's petition. And a fake agency somehow managed to get an office in the Federal Secretariat, open accounts at the Central Bank of Nigeria, appear in the national budget, and receive civil service approval for 314 staff positions, all without anyone stopping it for over a year. Whether Gbajabiamila is guilty of what Adeniyi is alleging, I cannot tell you. The evidence is not yet sufficient to make that determination honestly. What I can tell you is that the 5 questions I laid out in this video have not been answered. And until they are answered, the cloud over this administration heading into 2027 is not going away. 7 days. That is Atiku's deadline. Watch what Tinubu does with those 7 days, because his response will tell you more about the integrity of this government than any campaign promise or economic statistics briefing ever could. The clock is running. If this analysis gave you clarity on what is really happening inside Tinubu's government right now, share it with one Nigerian who needs to see it before 2027. Like this video, subscribe to Post Nigeria HQ, and tell me in the comments, do you believe Gbajabiamila knew about this agency or not? Every honest answer is welcome. I will see you in the next one.